Hi all, if you haven't looked at Styrocrete, this is a material that could change the building industry, especially for the small do-it-yourselfer. It is super cheap to build with, simple to build with, very insulative. It is fire resistant, termite resistant because of the Portland cement that it's mixed with, and it will last a lifetime. You can make it beautiful. I have finished now the end walls of the garden shed, and I want to show you how to build those in this video. This has been a fun project. It's really coming together. Styrocrete is over 85% recycled material with the shredded styrofoam, and ultimately using lumber that's been thrown away. You can rip it into 1 buys or 1.5 buys depending on how long you're having to extend, and build your trusses. And then that is your mold to actually tack on the hardboard and pour your Styrocrete into the mix, pack it in there good, and take them off, oil them, clean them up, put them on the next area, pour your next area. It is a simple process to do. Anybody can do it. You just need a mixer. You need a foam generator to make the foam for the Aircrete, and buy yourself some Portland cement, a little bit of lime if you want to. You don't even need to do that. And then you need the fiber mesh that will cover the exterior of the whole building. And when you stucco it, that is when you get the really hard shell, and this thing holds the whole thing together. When I made these end walls, I found out I did this out of order. I should have poured the end walls first before the roof was in my way, because then the hardboard, when I tacked it onto this, I could have extended it all through the roof, and I wouldn't even have to cut. I had to do a lot of cutting with the hardboard to get it to fit right, and then I could have very easily poured from the top. Now, you know, there was a truss right in the middle, which is 1.5 inches thick, but I was pouring a 3.5 inch wall, so I would have had some room on either side that I could have gotten down in there to pour. But as it works out, you know, here's a stud, and so it closes up that gap. So how do you get the Styrocrete in there? Well, you cover it to there and just leave a little tiny triangle at the top, and then you hand pack it down in there. And I had to make a new packer out of a flexi tube, you can see here, and reach down in there to pack it because of how awkward it was to be able to fill the cavities. And it would have been so much easier if I'd done it first and then poured the roof. Now I got the job done, but it was a royal pain because of that. But I had to cut up several of my hardboards to utilize this to be able to close it in and pour it. Now I'm using treated 2x4s around the windows and the doors to protect it, and that will be my nailing surface, screwing surface when I hang my barn doors. I'm going to make some pretty cedar barn doors. I've got a lot of cedar left over from building the house, so I want to do that with this. And I've already bought a white vinyl window for the back and be putting it in. And I've been working on the trim, and I built a power supply to make a hot wire cutter to be able to cut out my own trim out of throwaway styrofoam. And so the pieces that are long and flat I'm using for that, and I'll run it through the hot wire and cut it into various shapes. And I'll show another video how you can do that. You have to size your power supply just right, depending on how thick a wire and how long the wire is will govern what size power supply that you need to drive the amps through that wire to heat the thing up. And there's a website I found, jacobsonline.com, and it's solely dedicated to hot wire cutters and how to size them. And that's where I learned how much I would need for the 16 gauge wire that I used for the trim, and the 26 gauge wire I used to make a shredder. My shredder has an 8x8 inch cavity to drop down into the lawnmower shredder. And so I've got these giant blocks that I got from a boat company, and I'm having to use chainsaw to chop them up with electric chainsaw. It makes a huge mess. I said, nah, let me make a wire cutter, and I've got them on 6-inch levels, and I just put the thing on the top and just let it sink through. It cuts it beautifully, and then I go the other direction to put them into 6-inch blocks, and I can just drop those things down in my shredder. No mess, and works wonderful. And it's pretty simple to make, and I'll show you how in another video. When I made the trusses, I decided to make them the same way as I did when I made the arched A-frame, by ripping it into 1/2-inch pieces and then putting a double layer and gluing and nailing it together, and then putting a block and then another layer of two 1/2-inch pieces. And the reason I did that is I was noticing some of the boards were warping when I would cut them into 1.5 by 1-inch strips. But after the fact, I determined it's really just the treated lumber that's warping so badly. The regular wood, yellow pine, and Douglas fir was staying pretty straight. And it was a lot more work to do it that way. I figured, if it was in 1/2-inch and you glue and stuff, it'll keep it straighter together. But that's not needed. Save yourself some trouble. And if you're doing straight walls, rip them into 1-inch or 1.5-inch pieces and build your trusses that way. Straight trusses are really easy to put together. You have your nice fence, put your pieces up against there, put your 1-inch, stagger your blocks where you want them, put another piece in, clamp it together and glue the blocks together, and then pop your nails from both sides, and you're done. Now, I made a chart, a graph of the ends to show exactly where the trusses were going to be and determine what lengths they were, and I just made them from that. And so made sure that I had, a 5 foot right here and a 6 foot there and a 4 foot there and so on, and built them all. And then I dipped them into my vegetable oil vinegar mix to preserve them, let them dry, and then I was ready to start building. They went in fine. I put a 1.5-inch strip on the bottom, which is the size of my middle block that I was doing, so the trusses would have a little notch on the bottom, and I could just fit them down over that and nail into the side. To join it to the concrete, I shot nails down through that treated 1.5 piece and glued it with wood glue, liquid nails, and that worked great. But if I did it over again, I would do a 3.5-inch plate on the bottom and bolt it to the ground, and then nail the trusses into that instead of this. This wasn't as strong, and if you just use, you could use a 3.5-inch truss as well, and that would be a good base to nail to. When I put the hardboard on, I experimented overlapping because it's only about 1/8 of an inch thick, and it worked fine. You get a ridge when you take the molds off, but you hit it with your rasp and it smooths it out and nothing flat, and works great. And that eliminates a lot of the cutting where you can overlap these things. Now, I ran some numbers I want to share with you here. The Styrocrete for this whole building, this is a 12 by 20, a little over 11 feet high, worked out to 38 batches that I mixed in my mixer. It took 15 bags of 94-pound Portland cement. That's about $16.77 a bag right now, so that's about $250 worth of Portland cement. It took less than a gallon of the FM 160 agent. It's around, so that's about $24 or about $36 for a gallon. Spent about $26 on nails for the nail gun. The fiber mesh, the best price I'm finding for the 4.5 ounce is around 9 cents a square foot. And so it's about $40 a roll for 36 by 150. So it took $108 worth of fiber mesh, and that's wrapping it inside and outside the entire building. And then the first coat of stucco, and this is a 1-quart part Portland, half a part lime, 3 parts sand. Took 6 bags of Portland to do the first coat, so that works out to $100. And then the lime, 2 bags of lime at $50. Sand was less than a yard, so about $35. 1 bottle of bonding agent at $18. And then the second coat about the same. So the whole structure with 2 coats of stucco and the entire frame comes in a little over $720. Now, I'm using salvage lumber and I'm recycled styrofoam. I'm not putting a cost on either one of those. And then the paint, elastomeric roofing paint, is going to run about $270. And so I'm probably going to do a whitewash lime on the inside. That's the cheapest way to put a white coat on the interior. And I'm at less than $1,100 for this entire building. For stapling the fiber mesh onto the 2x and the Styro Aircrete, I had an electric stapler by Ryobi, I had a hand pumped stapler from Stanley, and then I had a Bostitch hammer stapler. The Ryobi is really nice, except sometimes it just doesn't want to fire, and you're working, you can't figure out why it won't fire, and so that got annoying at times. But that hammer stapler is really easy. You just pull it tight and then pop, 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 pop with it, and it does great. Now you use a little more staples, but not a big deal. But I highly recommend getting one. They're not that expensive, and that went really fast. And in fact, you could even staple it right into the Styro Aircrete, and it was holding along the edges because you overlap it into the edge so that you can blend and cement this wall to this wall. That is really important, and into the base. So I've overlapped it about 1.5 inches at the bottom, and I'm stuccoing it to the floor as well. And that's what ties the whole building together for you. Now, this is the first coat. When you do stucco work, this is where a little practice is necessary, and probably the most work of the whole building process. But it's not that difficult, and there's some good videos on learning how to stucco. The key is to tilt your trowel where the back blade is dragging, and it's normal to put it flat. It feels normal to put it flat and slide it, and you'll take a lot of mud off if you do that. And so you learn as you go. Okay, that was not good, just messed me up right there. And so you tilt it one way, and then when you come back, you got to tilt it the other way. And that takes a little practice, and you learn where to take it from the bottom and work it up so it doesn't fall all off of your trowel. And the kind of mix, you want a fairly runny mix for this first one. The goal here is to get it into the mesh and stick to the Styro Aircrete. That's the goal, and leave a nice rough surface for your final coat. And this is where using the float works really good, and you can actually apply it with the float if you want. Now, in the corners, I found the trowel is far easier, and using that black tub, you can just get a little bit of mud along the edge and balance it over here, and then slap it to the wall right into the corner, and then slide it off, and it will leave mud right in the corner. And then come in there with your sponge float and smooth it all out where it needs to be. That was the easiest way to do it. Now for the final coat, of course you got to wet it and then spray it with some bonding agent. Now you don't have to, but I'm finding it is a little better. I actually do a watered down mix of the Sika bonding agent that you can get at Home Depot and Lowe's, and then spray it on the wall after I've wetted it. So I wet it first, and then I put that bonding agent before you put it up. Now, is it beneficial to add bonding agent into your stucco Portland mix? And the answer is yes. It makes it more water resistant, and it also makes it more flexible when it dries. And I tested this where I poured 3 different pieces, 7/16 inch thick. I put fiber mesh under each one, and the first mix was Portland cement, 1 part, half part lime, and 3 parts sand. So it was a 1-to-2 mix. And mixed that up and did the first one. Second one, I experimented with using acrylic paint, and I got some from Habitat for Humanity, cheap indoor acrylic paint, and I think it makes a difference of the quality of the acrylic paint when you use paint. And paint is very similar acrylic base to what is in bonding agent. And so I did 1-to-1, replaced half of the water with the paint and made a mixture there. Same Portland cement, lime, and all. And then the third one was to mix half and half with water and bonding agent. And once it had dried for a couple of weeks, then I did some weight testing of it to put some weight on there until it broke. The Portland cement, lime, water took 30 pounds to break it, and it broke, and of course fiber mesh held it up, but it cracked pretty good. The acrylic paint, it took 30 pounds, hang on a minute, it was 20 pounds for the without, 30 pounds with the acrylic, and it had more hairline cracks on it. And then the bonding agent, it took over 40 pounds, and it never really cracked. It just kind of sank and bent and just very, very hairline cracks. So it behaved very differently. And so that is a huge benefit, having that in there. Now, when I mix bonding agent with my mix in the mixer, it sticks to the mixer. It makes it really hard to work, to get it out of the mixer and get it clean. So it's a whole lot easier to spray the wall first, put it on, and then as a finish, you can spray it on the top and then slick it up. And that puts a nice seal bonding agent over the top. I've seen that in some other videos doing that as well, and I plan to try to do that when I do the final coat. But that is where I'm at with this, and the walls and the first coat done. Now it's the finishing touches to put the finish coat on this and put the trim up, and then ultimately to put some paint on this thing. And I'm looking at elastomeric roofing paint, but I'm not positive on that. Drylock also has a really good waterproof paint. There's a lot of different choices. I want to tint it in a kind of a tan color to paint it, and maybe do a two-tone with the trim on the garden shed. So folks, thanks for watching. Lots of other videos that I've put, about 9 so far. If you're excited about Styro Aircrete like I am, once we get done with this, we're going to go start talking to civil engineers, structure engineers, and see what it's going to take to get them to be able to approve it with a green stamp. So you guys that are in permit area to build will be able to put up Styro Aircrete buildings. So good luck with your creative building.